starting it. All right, Mary Kay, are you in? Well, all right, I'm going to do one more thing. Julia, now are you able to turn your mic off now? Oh, we got you, everybody. Hi.
Yes, I am.
Oh, perfect. And she's okay. All the things. Thank you. This is why you hire an intern for the summer, where you can like run over to her desk real quick and have her help you out.
That's nice.
Take the village, right?
Ain't that the theme of this whole thing? It's actually what the subtext should have been for working moms at work. Hashtag it takes a village.
Yep. And not just for the kids. Yeah.
Oh, no. Very much. I was driving into the office this morning, and it took me an hour and a half to get here because for some reason 494, 694 just decided that they needed to shut down all 3 lanes, but not give anybody any sort of preemptive notice. So then you get like veered onto 35W South. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this way to work, figure this out. So I'm halfway into the office, and then my girlfriend calls, my village calls, and she is, she's like, I'm heading to a big meeting. I have a big proposal, and I needed somebody to give me, like, I needed my hype woman this morning. So in the interest of all things, working mom and all things, needing a village, I feel like I checked many of those boxes already before 9 a.m.
Before 9 o'clock.
Go Erin. And I don't know if Erin shared, but we didn't have electricity this morning. So I was like all ready, seriously, like ready to run out the door and go to Field Collective this morning to do this. And then as soon as I opened the garage door, lights went on.
Oh, thank goodness. I didn't even think about
I wondered about that last night when I was laying in bed thinking, will the modem work? Will everybody be there?
You know, the storm wasn't so bad here. Like it just rained, and it wasn't like a terrible thunderstorm or anything. Was it bad by you?
It was heavy for a couple hours. For like 1 to 3, I was like, whoop, that might be the loudest I've ever heard. But then the streets were dry when we got up this morning, which surprised me. So
you're in Woodbury?
Yeah. Okay. Pretty far east, like closer to Hudson than
I know we got rain, but I didn't really hear it storm.
I didn't either.
Here. You didn't either, Erin? Because I know you're not too far.
I was thinking I even had my window open next to my bed, and I didn't drink last night, so I can't even like attest to any part of the reason why I didn't hear it. So,
well, I heard it, but I didn't seem that terrible. But it didn't go off until this morning. So, yeah,
weird.
Yeah. So walking around and then no electricity, and I'm like, oh shoot.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, we're here. We get it done, ladies. We get it done.
Get it done.
Get it done.
Well, even like as I'm texting Mary Kay, I'm like, you do you. Like in the interest of all the things, we will figure it out one way or the other. You do what you need to do. And I'm like, I'm halfway in the middle of 30, like I'm off of Diffley, which I don't think I've ever even driven on Diffley Road, at least not in a very long time. And I'm like, well, I just hope I get to the office and Mary Kay, gets light and people show up and all of those things have happened. I am here. Mary Kay is on. We've got 21 people already on the call and it's not even 9 o'clock. So awesome. We've done something right already, ladies. So, just breathe a sigh of relief. Well, with that, it is now 9. It is 9 o'clock. And I am not usually on time, but today we're going to be on time and get things started. So I want to just say thank you, the 3 of you, for, figuring it out this morning. So we're going to get that started. I'm going to make sure my recording is going. Recording is on. We are set to go. We've got people on the call. This is great. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time this morning to be a participant and engage in today's Lakeside Chat of Moms at Work. I have an amazing panel with me today that I'm excited to get a chance to both introduce you to, as well as have them have a chance to introduce themselves. we and throughout, I want to make sure that I just remind you this is sessions recorded. I'll remind you a couple times, but also as a reminder for those of you that are new to a Lakeside Chat, with the recording is going to get posted. It will be live. It will be shared with you as a follow-up. So you have access to this as something that if this was helpful for you and need to scroll back to minute 2022 to Trisha's amazing piece of information, you'll be able to go back and do so. The PowerPoint slides will also be provided, as well as any of the content that we reference. I'll make sure that you get all the links as follow-up to today's conversation as well. But without further ado, let's move forward and introduce my lovely panel of today's conversation, Moms at Work. And I want to just kick off with the idea that I picked the concept of Moms at Work. Obviously, every month we've done something just a little bit different, but recognition of moms being Mother's Day. And I don't know if anyone saw my LinkedIn post from this last Friday, but I will also say that this is also Mental Health Month. So I've said in my social post this week that I feel like there is some element of non-coincidence to the fact that Mother's Day falls in Mental Health Month, because it's a good reminder for those of us that are moms that sometimes our mental health gets tested. And I know for one myself that it felt very apropos when I recognized that there was some serendipity between those two events happening at the same time. So bringing the third component to that serendipitous conversation is today's Lakeside Chat of Moms at Work. And so I have selected my three friends and panelists today, because you are of all three, both sit in both camps, who are all doing really amazing things when it comes to supporting the necessary effort of both work-life balance, as well as the conversation of making sure that we have the right level of flexibility to make sure that the right women are finding their ways into the right seats, and that we're making sure that we're being able to support and lift those women up along the way. And so with that, I'm going to introduce Angela Chrisman, who is founder, and I'm going to only speak to one of your many hats today, Angela. We're going to talk about Mariv today. Mary Kay, help me. I feel like I've said your last name, and I worry every single time I say it, I'm going to say it wrong. So you're going to say your last name because I'm going to say it wrong, just to be sure. Mary Kay.
Never worry, for sure. You can say it any way you want, but it's Zinowitz.
So I think that is what I was pretty darn close if I wasn't there. And then Trisha Deggy of Mom Mastermind. So I'm going to let you guys all introduce yourself quickly, knowing that we're going to jump into your particular businesses here in just a second. But Angela, do you want to just do a quick introduction, and then we'll go right down the line?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Erin said, I'm Angela Chrisman. I've spent a long career, almost 20 years in HR leadership, and now have founded Mariv, a consultancy that's focused on work-life harmony, but we're going to talk a lot more about that later. I live in Stillwater, and yeah, just happy to be on here and join everyone today.
Awesome. Mary Kay.
Hi, and I'm Mary Kay with Bus Stop Mamas. I am probably the only one on the call that does not have HR or recruiting as a background. My background is marketing, branding, business development. I worked with law firms for many, many years as chief marketing officer, and started my own consulting firm for 10 years. And then I started Bus Stop Mamas in 2019.
So good. And we're going to hear so much more about what Bus Stop Mamas is doing here along the way. And last but most definitely not least, my friend Trisha Deggy. You want to talk a little bit about your history? And I think you're wrong, Mary Kay. Trisha also doesn't have a formal HR background. She's a finance girl. So Trisha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Go, Trisha.
Yes. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me. So Erin and I speak quite a bit together, and I'm usually the one asking questions. So it's fun to flip-flop with you today. So I'm the founder and CEO of Mom Mastermind, which is a company that helps businesses develop and retain talented working moms in order to grow organically the leadership pipeline and put more women into the C-suite over time. And I'm the mom of two. I live in Woodbury, and super fun to be with Erin and Angela and Mary Kay for this discussion.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you. I want to just do a quick reminder of rules of engagement. I know we've got a couple newbies on the call, and I know that we've got some regulars as well. So I'm just going to walk through rules of engagement. And I already saw somebody using the raise of hand, so I don't remember, and their hand came down. So I was going to say, if you had something to say, I want you to say it. So first, I think I said it on the front end, but this is a public session. It is going to be recorded. Will be shared on our YouTube channel for people to review. I'll send you the link, but it is something that if, again, you want to come back to, or if you want to revisit any one of our former Lakeside chats, you can go back and watch those on our Lakeside's YouTube channel as well. We want you to engage. Part of somebody the other day goes, I really like your podcast. And I was like, I don't want you to think they're a podcast, because a podcast is pre-recorded content. And this is not a podcast. This is what I want to feel like a live experience. It's an opportunity. So I always, like, if anyone has a better word than webinar, and feel free to send it my way. But we want you to engage with the Teams chat. So raise your hand. Oh, we want the chat to be active. If you've got a question or you want to react to something, use and engage in the features that are available to you. At some point, depending on where we go, I might ask you to even just turn yourself off mute and add your voice to the conversation as well. So we really, truly want this to feel like it's a more of an experience than something that would have felt pre-recorded. And so we want you to engage as much as possible. Positive discussion, genuine curiosity. One of Lakeside's founding values is the concept of curiosity. I don't think any one of us here recognize, at least not from the panel, I think all four of us would note that none of us we know everything, right? That we are coming into this with no in particular specifically right answer. And so we're just creating discussion. And that's what I want this to feel like. And then the goal of this is conversation starting. I think we're going to start the conversation, but by no means are we going to leave you with something that felt like you got every answer that you've ever needed. I think that the idea of this is to be provocative enough that you've got some really great ideas as to how you might be able to bring this back to your individual life, but hopefully even to be able to bring it back to the organizations that you work and support, to be able to make sure that we're keeping that conversation rolling. So that is highest level Lakeside Chats, rules of engagement. Have your coffee mug ready, be ready for the conversation. So I wanted to kick this off with, I'm a mom of two boys. I am a working mom of two boys. And I joke all the time that as I hop onto my Instagram feed when I'm not supposed to scroll unnecessarily, I get bombarded, or I get moms that will send me memes of things that make us laugh as working moms or moms. And I wanted to just highlight a couple just to sort of add some levity right out the gate. The first one I think is my favorite, and it's I love getting emails about play groups and fun, free things happening on Tuesdays at 10:15. Said no working mom ever. Motherhood, some days amaze yourself. Other days you go to work like this in two different colored black shoes. I have for sure done that. What's on my to-do list today? Oh, that's right, everything. And I finally got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 4 days, but whatever. So these are just four of the many. I feel like I was bringing one up yesterday. I'm a baseball mom, and there was a mom text that I got from a friend yesterday that said something like, as baseball moms, we would jump in front of a bus to save our kids, but we scream like bloody murder when they strike out using their $400 bat. And so there are mom memes everywhere to be able to support, and I don't know, maybe add both levity and validation to our crazy along the way. And so with that, I want to just start the conversation knowing that you all had some element of inspiration that got you started in terms of where you were headed, and sort of where the idea of the work that you've now have gone all in on, right? All three of you have now gone all in on the work that you're doing in the 3 different organizations that you guys are supporting. So Trisha, why don't you kick us off? What was the inspiration behind Mom Mastermind, and give us a little bit about kind of what got you where you are now?
So I would say Mom Mastermind really came from my personal experience, and then as my kids got a little bit older, reflecting back on that. So I was, a classic career woman. Really enjoyed my work. I started in consulting after graduate school, and then got hired by a client here in the Twin Cities. And so when it was a CFO for a large health system, and I loved my work. I worked a lot, and then I had a baby. And then 19 months later, I had another baby, and my husband, Brian, is a commercial pilot. So he is very hands-on and helpful when he's here. And then part of the week, about half the week, I'm a single parent. And so figuring out how to juggle all that. And then the kids got into elementary school and I got promoted. So I've still got a traveling husband, still got 2 kids, and now it's the backpacks and the homework and the sports schedules and the carpools and all the things. And during that time, we had, kind of some bumpy childcare experiences. And so I think the experiences of many in my life. And so reflecting on that, the importance of, I worked for a great organization. I had bosses who really cared. We didn't talk a lot about mothering, but I knew that they were generally supportive. At the same time, there's a lot of literature about, especially for women, as you go up the ladder, isolation. And I think that's different than feeling lonely. I wasn't lonely. I had 2 little people at my side. I felt like constantly. So I wasn't lonely, but it did feel isolating. I was the only person in the garage with car seats in the back of my car. Most people that were peers to me had kids in high school or out of college. And so it just felt kind of like I was on an island. And that's one of the things that I work a lot with my clients on, is the minute you don't anymore feel like a unicorn, the whole experience kind of opens up. Oh yes, there are other people who feel the way that I do. And then lastly, I think there's a lot of tips and tricks to how to make this work really well. And they're not always easy things, but the way you manage your team, the way you manage your calendar, the things that you start, stop, and delegate at home, and bringing more conversation to the, how do we really do this well? Because I'm a big believer that most of us have these amazing pieces in our life, and it's our job to put them together in a way that feels really good. And so that's the premise of what I do and how I got here.
Thank you. I think that when I met you the first time, I think the first conversation that I had heard was that you were recognized that you were one of the only moms that was showing up in work stuff at a baseball game. Like the idea of that unicorn moment of knowing, and I've been there. I was joking, and it's always so funny when you show up at the baseball game or whatever, still in a blazer or high heels or something. Like, ooh, you're fancy. I was like,
yeah, right,
sure.
Yeah,
coming from work.
Very true.
All right, Mary Kate, give us a little bit around your inspiration for Bus Stop Mamas.
Sure. So my husband was actually our stay-at-home parent for our daughter for the first 10 years of her life. And he, like many people who stay at home, was feeling kind of sad. He wanted to be around adults, wanted to exercise his other talents, and he wanted to contribute to our household income. All of these things go along with staying at home with our children, no matter who we are. So my husband went back to work, and I brought my business in-house. At that point, I owned a consulting practice that I mentioned. And then I got to stand out at the bus stop for the very first time with all the other mamas. And when you guys talk about, wardrobe, I was the fish out of water. Like, all these moms were super cute mom clothes with their melon hats, had their mugs and their cute clothes. And I was in workwear because that's all I had. I didn't have cute mama clothes. Anyways, I'm still trying to get there. And now my daughter's graduating from high school. But anyway, so I got to stand out at the bus stop for the first time when Lily, my daughter, was 10. And here I was with all of these incredible women who exited their careers to care for their children, all in awesome mom wear, comfy clothes, and all waving to their kids as they took off on the bus. And then they'd all turn to each other and ask, "What are you doing today?" And I felt their same sadness at the bus stop that I experienced my husband having. And I thought, oh my gosh, many of these women had attempted to go back to work to no avail, got quick rejections or no rejections at all. And I knew if the people I worked with had an opportunity to meet them, they'd hire them in a heartbeat. The problem was they never got to meet them. So that's the problem I went about fixing. And I also recognized that life changes. So at this point, I only had a 10-year-old. But I remember what it was like to have a baby, which is very different. So we talk about our mamas as car seat, crating your kid around, car seat mamas, bus seat mamas, moms that are waving to their kids as they get off on the bus. We call them our 9 to 3 movement. Driver seat mama, which is where I'm at right now. My daughter drives herself to school and drives herself to softball and all of her other events and work and beyond, which I will be a beyond mama in the fall. But each one of these phases, life changes. And I always like to remind women of that. And we only know what we know. So Bus Stop Mamas was made to fit within those cycles of our children. As they mature, our time opens up. So that was my inspiration for Bus Stop Mamas. That's what I went about fixing. And we're doing that with one click. That's the way mamas do it, right? We take care of a lot of things fast.
Yeah, I think that was, I'm going to keep like calling out how we got connected. So Mary Kay, I'll be honest, I think I got connected with you when Bus Stop Mamas was given some notoriety outside of you, right? Like it was started to get highlighted, I think as a business journal or somebody noted you as a sort of up and coming business a couple years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And that's what drew me into meeting Mary Kay. Because to your point, having something that feels like a more of a focused place, a starting point that feels like you can start within one click and be able to connect, kind of be that matchmaker between the role and the person, is really, I think is such a great, and I love how you called it the problem you were fixing. I think that's exactly the thing that I found to be so inspirational in the work that you were doing. Now, Angela, you and I got connected through connections. You and I got connected in a really much more organic space. So let's talk a little bit about your inspiration for Maravi and the kind of the idea around work-life balance.
Yeah, thanks, Erin. So first of all, I want to say Maravi means mother life in French. So that's where the name comes from. And my inspiration for Maravi really comes from my career as an HR professional. I've done so much work over the years related to flexibility at work, even before the pandemic, right? We knew that people wanted more flexibility, and it's become more of a trend long ago. And part of that is because we wanted to provide more opportunities for women to be more fulfilled professionally and meet all of the demands of life. The reality is that there was an AARP study recently that said that 73 to 75% of the workforce is caring for someone. So we're talking about moms specifically today, and know that 3/4 of the workforce in general is caregiving. So caregiving is a huge topic, and it's a huge driver of people's need for flexibility. And so really, I mean, this is just about the fact that work is changing and life is changing. People have greater and greater needs. Companies have greater needs for talent, right? And access to talent, like Mary Kay was talking about, that they might not otherwise have access to. So it's a couple of things. It's the driver of flexibility, and then it's companies having access to great talent. So those are the things that Maravi really addresses. So we offer talent the opportunity to work fractionally, and we offer companies access to talent that wants to work fractionally, that has had long corporate careers and just really wants more flexibility at this point, this talent, and so is not as interested in working in corporate anymore. And then from a consulting standpoint, we help companies to address employee burnout, and then also this tension that companies feel between the flexibility that employees want and the productivity that leaders are desiring. Often we hear about that expressed as a tension, right? We are hearing it a lot now with return to office. CEOs are saying, get back to the office. We need to be more productive, and being in the office makes people more productive. And sometimes that might be the case, but not always, right? Depending on the types of work that people do. And so one of the things that we really help companies with is to say, okay, employees want more flexibility. Companies want employees to be productive. That really comes down to efficiency on both sides, right? The more efficiently that we can work and the more flexible our culture is, the more flexibility we have and the more productive we can be in our roles. So I won't go into all the details of how we do that, but there's really the talent side and then the consulting side of the business, all inspired by this desire to provide more flexibility for moms and caregivers more broadly.
Yeah, and I think, and thank you for sort of going back to the concept of caregiver. I think I'm using the phrase, I'm calling this obviously working, moms at work, because of the idea that like, it's Mother's Day, it's, whatever, it's the month. But I do think it's important for us to think, I think that I like that sort of more looser interpretation. Mary Kay, you talked about it, right? The idea of your husband being the caregiver during those first 10 years and his feeling of wanting to get back into the work. And I think that is that piece of it, of being in that place to say, whatever the scenario, how are we making sure that we're thinking about it through that lens of making sure that we're looking for efficiencies, looking for the building the connection, and then making people have those right tips and tricks to make sure that they are doing it in a way that makes it feel effective. So thank you. I love this lovely little, connection between all three of the work that you're doing. All right, so we're gonna jump into what I'm calling, this is the new portion of Lakeside Chat. So in prior events, I've sort of trickled in a couple stats, and Angela's already sort of graced us with some good ones here along the way. But I want you as participants to participate in this fact and react section as well. So we want to be in a position, we're gonna present 3 different facts that we've heard, both in terms of what are some of the studies that are coming out, what are some articles that are coming out on this particular topic. And we're going to react to them as a panel, but I want you to sort of use and leverage the chat as needed too, to have your own reaction to what you're seeing when it comes to these particular facts that are just that, they're facts, and we have to figure out how we're going to react to them. All right, so the first one that we've got comes from our lovely friends at the Wall Street Journal. And this is about birth rate. And so the idea of recognizing that fewer babies are being born today in the U.S. in 2023, and I think that trend continues into 2024, than the year 1979. So I'm 44. I was born in 1979, so I can tell you, in 44 years, the fewer this is the lowest amount of babies have been born. And maybe they just said, Aaron was born in 1979, so we're just gonna I'm just kidding. But with knowing that American women are giving birth at lower than record rates, how does that hit you? And I know that we obviously, when we were prepping and talking about this, this came up. And Mary Kay, even in the meantime, I think there was another article that you found that sort of supported this same conversation. So Mary Kay, do you want to talk a little bit about your sort of immediate sort of guttural reaction, but also some of these sort of additional articles that have come out that have supported this kind of what this trend means in the workplace?
Sure. So actually recently, last Thursday, Bus Stop Mamas was featured in Bloomberg News. We were invited there because of this in particular. So super exciting. Thanks for the clap there.
Congrats.
Yeah, so and we had a great feature, and they featured one of our customers, which was also spectacular. So yeah, so this, fewer babies being born, as you mentioned, it's been the case for actually a long time, a lifetime. It's been the lowest fertility rate that we've had in a lifetime in the US. But this is a global issue, meaning every developed country is facing the fertility issue. And what I believe is behind it is children are expensive, women aren't stupid, and we're having fewer children. College debt is high, children are expensive, women aren't stupid. That's kind of the cycle of, we know as soon as we have a baby, our earning potential is marginalized. Because of that, we're having fewer and fewer children. 65% of college graduates are female. That impacts our people. And we know who has the people. We do. There are fewer and fewer women having babies. So that is really one of the economic saves that Bus Stop Mamas is doing. So with one click, we are helping families. So when I go to college campuses, I hear from young men and young women every single time. And I was just recently at St. Thomas. They will come up to me and say, "You are giving me hope that someday I can have a family." And it's, in my opinion, based on this. Like, it seems so hard to have a family today because college debt is high, children are expensive, women are the ones that sacrifice. And so with Bus Stop Mamas, we are changing that. We are shedding the light on her value, which is huge, her value, which is in the office, her value, which is at home, her value to the economy. And so that Bloomberg article, if you guys get a chance to read it, please read it. I think you have to pay $1.99 to subscribe for 3 months, and then you can unsubscribe to actually read the full article. But it was very flattering to be in there. It's very flattering to be considered an economic player right now, because prior to Bus Stop Mamas, women were not factored into the economic stories. So we now work with the Federal Reserve Bank of Minnesota, for instance, and we supply them with data. This gives me goosebumps because women, you matter. You matter. And never before were we measured when we exited the workplace. We're measured now. You matter. And we are making a difference in the economy. And everything you do matters. If you decide to have that baby, that's great, because we need people who build.
Yeah, we need people.
We do.
Yeah. Actually, that's a good point of it, and I think that's the part that I like it from both angles, because and this leads me to wanting to sort of pose this at you, or to you, Angela, because I think the other sort of trend, again, I think of even some of the prior Lakeside chats that I've done, is we talked about AI in the workplace, right, and some of the efficiencies that are coming through the lens of AI, and so you start to go with this piece of it, like, yes, we need people, we need to make sure that we still need to, I mean, every time I see another apartment complex go up, I'm like, well, we're going to need people, because those things are going to need to get filled. And so, but we also know that we are seeing different efficiencies coming to the workplace as a result. Like, there's sort of this interesting sort of dichotomy of two trends that are happening at the same time. And so, Angela, curious from your lens, as you talk about the essence of efficiency and what Mary V is doing, and the conversation that you're approaching it with, when you see this stat and when you hear about the reduction in, so the birth rate and the impact that it's going to have on the workplace, what do you think? And I want to make sure I also call out what's on the chat, because I think we talked about, Mary Kay, I loved it that you brought up the how much college costs. But as a mom that's sort of in that, what did you call it? I'm in the driver's seat situation. The cost that we know that sort of the ongoing opportunity cost that's coming with our children is also daunting. And so we also live in the, like, what do I have to pay for now? And then what is the next 18 years going to cost me? And that goes back into that conversation. So sorry, I know that I wanted to I didn't want to lose the chat. But Angela, from an efficiency standpoint, when you hear this, what do you think?
Yeah, and I want to share a couple more stats from the article with the group for context, and then jump into what you're saying about the technology pieces that are, and really kind of the macro factors tied to this, right? And where the labor market's going to go. So a little bit more context from the article. So in 1957, average births per woman were 3.8. Which is a lot, right? In 2023, it was 1.6. So like half, right, from what it was in 1957. So relative to 1.6, 3.8 feels like a lot. And to replace a generation, it requires an average of 2.1 births per woman. So just a little bit more context in terms of what this means for population growth and for workforce growth. And I think the article talks a lot about, and we know that people are waiting longer in general to have children, which affects fertility rates and yada, yada, yada. So there's so many factors at play here that are leading to this. But I think, to your point, Erin, advances in tech are really going to impact the ways that we work and make things more efficient, particularly for knowledge workers. And so when you think about what's happening with population growth, with birth rates and things like that, in the knowledge work sector, there are also these technological advances making work more efficient that might offset some of what would otherwise be this huge labor shortage, right?
Mhm.
In the skilled trades, however, we're going to continue to see a lot of these labor shortages because of these things with population growth that we're talking about and birth rates. So those are some things that I think are really important. And we think about, okay, so how does that affect work, and how does that impact the way that we think about talent in the future? Well, if you think about it, the way that companies tend to grow now is they say, oh my gosh, we're growing. We need to add more people, right? We must add more people. And then their business contracts, and lo and behold, they're laying off, right? So it's this flux of constant like headcount growth, headcount reduction, headcount growth, headcount reduction. So what businesses really need to be thinking about is, as they experience growth, what are all of the ways that they can support that growth without immediately adding full-time headcount, right? And full-time hires. And I know we're speaking to an HR audience here today, which is why I'm kind of emphasizing some of these points.
Yep.
And then when you think about that, you also think about the availability of this talent that wants more flexibility, either through fractional work, contract work, part-time work, whatever that is. And there's actually this really nice complementary relationship between what companies should be doing as they fill jobs to support their growth, and also what talent in the market needs and wants in terms of more flexibility, that I think is going to give us more opportunity over time. Add in the fact that things have changed with social structures. The way that healthcare is offered is very different than it used to be, right? It used to be that you had to have a full-time job, was the perception for the most part, in order to have access to healthcare benefits. That's no longer true. So when you think about how all these different factors are coming together, I think there are some really amazing changes coming in the ways that we work and the ways that we think about talent as HR professionals.
I love that, because it really, again, it goes back to what all three of your guys' missions are, the businesses that you guys do, right? Of being able to think about how work is being done differently, and how we can make sure that we're there's a cost component, there's an efficiency component, there's a cultural component that all sort of bleeds these 2-3 pieces together. And so I love that, because I do think that there's this way of thinking about it differently, but it's also following some of these trends of gig and fractional, and where the work is getting done and when the work is getting done. I think of even Mary Kay, of the idea of you really sort of are breaking down the time frames. But I've talked to businesses all the time that say, for the most part, they don't care. In certain jobs, it doesn't matter if the work's being done at 2 a.m. That program is getting built at 2 a.m. in somebody's closet, and they want to be on a gamer thing at 8 a.m. We're seeing more flexibility in a lot of different lenses, and I agree. I think that that's going to be a trend that we're going to continue to see. And whether or not, I do agree that I'm glad that you brought those other facts into it too, Angela, because I do think that 2.1 component, where we're only at 1.6, is still something we need to be thinking about. That part's not going away. All right, so let's jump into another fact. Another article and study that's been done recently, and I know that this one's gotten a lot of, I picked it up early, and then I've seen now that it's being talked about in a lot of different, throughout the Minnesota market quite a bit, but it's the Wallet Hub recently did a survey around working moms, and I really like this survey, and I'll send everyone the link as a follow-up, because it really used stats and data points of childcare and glass ceiling stats and access to pediatricians in an area, to really sort of bleed lots of data points together to create this number. And so Minnesota, so again, all 4 of us are in Minnesota. I know a number of you that are on today are in Minnesota, so I'm focusing on my own backyard. So I'll send it out for those of you that aren't in Minnesota to see where your particular state ranks. But Minnesota is ranked 5th overall for best states for working moms, EAS top 10. But we're only 16th when it comes to work-life balance. And I think that that's weird in its own way. Like, I immediately saw that, and I immediately was like, how are they so different? So Trisha, what was your reaction when you saw this article or heard about this particular stat?
Well, I would say very similar to your reaction, Erin, in that I love data and context and facts. I do think the fifth overall resonates for me in that this tends to be a state with a lot of activity, especially at the legislature, around social supports, healthcare, childcare, education, or investments that the state makes, and those are supportive. It's also, when you think about the Twin Cities and Minnesota more broadly, we have a number of large corporations that are headquartered here. We also have a very active small and mid-sized business and a startup community here. So there are a lot of opportunities, and I think those all play into the stats around the method and why we're ranked fifth. I did find work-life balance curious to drop down to 16th, which isn't terrible out of 50 states, but not super. And so I went and I looked at the method, and I was still curious because one of the components, which I think is a really fun one to add to the method, is commute time. But having lived in New York City, Atlanta, and Chicago before I moved here, I think it's pretty good. Getting over the bridges can be a pain, and the snow can be a pain, but relative to other cities, I'm like, curious. Parental leave, and given that we're also the home to Parentally, which is, I think, the leader in the market around parental leave and all of the supports around the time that parents take off to be with their children, that's interesting to me. And then the duration of the work week is the third item in the method, and that one didn't necessarily resonate for me. I have clients nationally, and I don't. The ones here, that doesn't tend to be as much of a focus. What's the work week, and how long is that? There's a similar article that came out around the same time as this one, and it was a little shorter on data, but a little more focused on solutions. And I had the opportunity to comment on that one. And the thing I would add that this article doesn't delve into as much is, okay, so what's the solution? And I think it's three-tiered. There's activity at the state. There are things that the government can do to support working mothers better around expectations, and then incentives. If there are tax, incentives to promote childcare or other leave or other benefit options, that's helpful. Businesses, this tends to be a very collaborative business environment, and to the extent that businesses can come together and work on these challenges instead of every single one doing it themselves, but also that conversation with employees about what is it that you really want and how do we support that. But there's also, this personal component to this, and I think data is great, but a lot of how we perceive this, especially this juggling act, you can't measure in data. It's the way we think about this act of what we're trying to judge or juggle, and our kind of locus of control around that. And so while I love data, I think there are a lot of moms that be like, I think it's great to work in Minnesota, and others not. And it's not always, the factors that are measured or measurable.
Yeah. Angela, again, what were your immediate thoughts? And again, I appreciate you, Tricia, sort of digging into some of those other data points and bringing in some other metrics into the conversation as well. It makes this even more colorful, which I love. Angela, thoughts?
Well, my first thoughts were what is number one on the list doing, right? So I looked at number one on the list is Massachusetts. So, and one of the things that they looked at was the unemployment rate for women in the state, and it's quite low. It's 2.8%, but they also have some of the best parental leave policies in the country, and they have some of the best public schools in the country. So some of these support mechanisms for people to rely on, and their average woman's work week is about 35 hours. Rhode Island was number two, and that was more around the ratio of female to male executives was another factor that they looked at that I thought was really interesting. And then I always go, and then DC was third on the list, Washington, DC, and that was about professional attainment and availability of childcare. And I think that we know that childcare is a huge factor in all of this, right? I'm always really interested in what's going on in the Nordic countries, because they have a lot of the social mechanisms that we talk about gaps in the United States. Like, they have better access to childcare. There are greater parental leaves available. There are similar expectations of men for the types of parental leaves and things that they take. And yet they still have some significant gaps in female leadership representation. And so I think this is a complicated thing, right? It's part of it is the social mechanisms at play. Part of it is our cultural norms and expectations that we have. And some of it's the support that companies are providing directly for their teams. And some of it's just, there's some bias at play here as well.
Yeah.
I think we would all agree.
Yeah.
Can I just say one thing
Yeah.
here too is, I've talked to literally hundreds and hundreds of moms over the years, and childcare is an issue. Childcare is a huge issue. It's an issue because it's not really fully understood. Number one, there is not enough childcare, meaning there are not enough people to provide childcare. If everybody got childcare in our country, like all you had to do is press a button and you get childcare, it's not feasible. We don't have enough people to provide it. But I also know from talking to moms is a lot of people don't want it because they either have special needs, they're afraid of who's watching their kids. That is a big deal to moms of how do we fix this? And in my opinion, and I look at this and I'm with you, Tricia, and both of you, these numbers are very interesting. I just posted in the chat, something about a doctor yesterday, but we don't have work that fits mom's schedule. When we have schools that are off for 2-3 months in the summer, how do you work? When we hit how is the system working for us? It
Right.
doesn't, quite frankly. So how do you get balance? It's changing, and it means that we need to fight together, mamas. Let's change this for us. Work that fits within our schedule is one way of changing it and offsetting that childcare need. That's what we do. And employers don't have to pay for it if they step careers. That is a big savings to employers, and it's a big savings to government.
Yeah. And the chat's talking about it too, right? So the idea of the cost, I think of the woman that I trusted to watch my children when it came to daycare. And I know she's been doing it for 35 years, and due to change in government, she's considering stepping back, right? I think that we're seeing kind of the amount of money that costs to run a childcare, and I think
and liability.
Again, we are create and liability. Yes, the insurance piece of it as well. That there's again, I go back to those rules of engagement. We are here to create the conversation and to hopefully keep you guys talking about it, because nobody's solving this issue on this call. All right, so let's talk about another one. And this is, I think, Angela, you brought this up a little bit on the last one in terms of one of those stats that was used in that performer study. And it's the idea of that, the promotion and moving up. And so this is comes from Guardian. 2/5 of working mothers confess to having turned down a promotion or career development opportunity owing it to concerns that it would not fit into their childcare arrangements. And I'm seeing this already in the chat with even Anastasia talking about being a working grandmama, which I love. And just even in coming to some of those stats and facts and figures that came out of that Wallet Hub conversation, right? That we knew going into this that was going to be, that this is part of the conversation, right? We know that one of the things they're using to judge is this conversation around, where are we going professionally? Where are we taking that next promotion? Mary Kay, quick reaction. I know that I'm looking at the clock and I know we've got a little bit more we want to get through. So I want to just make sure. So quick reaction, guttural reaction when you heard this 2/5 rule or 2/5 idea. What did you think about it? And did this sort of strike you as, yep, that surprises me, as, yep, that, or I'm surprised it's high, low? What was your immediate thought?
My thought is that this is very interesting. So the facts are most women who have access to childcare have resources to pay for childcare. And most of the women who don't have access to childcare are not college educated. At Bus Stop Mamas, we have all moms, PhDs, GEDs, and none, and everything in between, because motherhood impacts our ability to progress in our jobs. I know that many women exit their careers for many reasons. And how we make this decision of leaving or not taking a promotion is really based on the needs of our children. And it's not a real black and white. We want to have black and white answers on these things, and it's easy to pick data and place it in, but the landscape of moms is broad, and why we turn down jobs is very personal. At the same time, staying in your career as your children mature is really important for promotions. Mm-hmm. So fixing that with keeping your foot in the door with work that fits within the life cycle of your children is something that I believe is very important to keeping women in those high-level jobs. And that's the difference between the Europe, and this was also in that Bloomberg story, the difference between having access to part-time work in Europe, which is awesome. The number of women in high-level positions is not as great as it is in the US. So there is a disconnect there. And we believe that keeping your foot in the door and graduating your career as your children mature allows you to fix this. So yeah. Childcare arrangements aren't problematic. So you are still staying in your game. You are still spending time with your children. And I will mention this too. Work does not last forever, but motherhood does.
Yeah.
We will all leave our jobs, but we will never leave being a mother for those who are mothers.
I think that's an interesting, I like the way you put that, because I think when I looked at this stat, I immediately, it's all about me. I mean, let's be honest, at the end of the day, it's all about me, right? So I immediately sort of make it about myself. And I thought through my career path, and so many of those decisions to your, mother, like we'll always be a mom, work will change, piece of it is I made decisions, I switched jobs because the location got further out. I switched jobs because travel was getting to be too much. And I did it, right? I didn't think about it as a decision for motherhood. I just did it because I'm like, my kids are sick of me. I'm sick of being gone, or I'm sick of, it didn't feel like I was taking, I didn't have this big epiphany moment that I felt like I was taking a step back from my career, from my kids. It just felt like I was just doing what I had to do because I was a mom and I wanted that mom job was important to me. And so that was my immediate reaction. Trisha, I'm curious just because, again, I love what the Mom Mastermind does in sort of both its micro and its macro mindset. And so Trisha, what was your thoughts when you saw this 2/5 stat?
Yeah, I think that childcare is really important. It is fundamental. If you don't have someone to care for your children, you can't work. What I thought was interesting about this article, so I guess bad student, Erin, I focus less on the stat and more on what does this article have to say. And the article says, we've got to have childcare, but it leads with the quote unquote motherhood penalty. And so I don't necessarily link the childcare stat and motherhood penalty, or haven't in the past. One of the things I learned last week on the Moms First Summit, they had the U.S. leader of UPS on in the childcare segment, and he said, at least for their group, when they surveyed their employees, they did not want on-site childcare. I think a lot of people run from this issue because businesses are like, I don't want the liability, I don't want the facility responsibilities, I don't want anything to do with this on-site childcare. And he said that actually wasn't what their people wanted. What they most needed, and this is their specific audience, was emergency backup care. So when my regular arrangements don't work, how do I still get to work? So I think that's interesting. So the article talked about childcare. It talked a little bit about flexible work, kind of dusted over the juggling act, which I think is really a very vague part of it. And I know that through my work. But when I think motherhood penalty, the two things the article didn't talk about at all are, and I think Mary Kay mentioned it, perception. This idea that somehow you get less smart and less sharp when you become a mother, which I think is the exact opposite. So there's a huge movement that we need around that just because you become a mom doesn't make you less dedicated. It actually, you're choosing to do both, and that makes you super valuable. But nowhere in the article did they mention, I think, the most important thing about the motherhood penalty, which is pay equity. And pay equity will pay for a lot of childcare, whether we do anything or not. Like that, to me, somehow everything I've read in the last 2 weeks, and I read a lot and consume a lot on LinkedIn, that seems to have dropped to the bottom of the discussion. And that solves a lot of problems, not just for moms, but for all women. And I think that this article kind of missed the boat by saying leading with motherhood penalty and not talking about that.
And I will just emphasize, though, that there's an assumption that everybody wants childcare, and they don't. And there is a way to offset it. And I agree with what you said about equity, Tricia. And there's different ways of looking at that too. Like, how do we get there? Children interrupt our work. That is just a fact. It's a fact. They interrupt it because they get sick. They interrupt it because they need us. They interrupt it for a lot of different reasons. And it's a fact.
Yeah.
So how do we fix it? We fix it by understanding that it's a fact. And
it's knowledge is power, right? Is what it is. There's a part of it that just says, like, let's not turn a blind eye to it. Let's just call out the elephant in the room. That is what it is. And I hate that phrase, by the way. All right, we've got 8 minutes, and I want to give this last question an opportunity for both the chat as well as the three of you. Yesterday I did a golf networking, women's golf networking thing. And was interesting. One of the women that is a business owner, and she was saying that she offered her employees all an Apple subscription as a benefit last year, so they all could watch Ted Lasso, because she wanted the whole group to have that Ted Lasso experience, which I thought was a very creative solution to being able to introduce concepts like curiosity and not judgmental and all sorts of things. So in the interest of things that are a way businesses can creatively support moms, Mary Kay, what is one way, if you sort of could leave the attendees on the call with the idea of something very quickly or something that they could do creatively to support the working mom, what would be your one suggestion?
Think about your schedules. Car seat, bus seat, driver's seat, and beyond is a real good way to consider her availability, and talk about motherhood under your roof, because it is a fact that people have kids, and it is a fact that she is typically the one that is taking care of those kids and having the kids. So I think having real discussions about, a topic that has been kind of taboo from under the roof at work, it's time now. It's time to start talking about that under the roof, because it's accepted. And for us to say it's a fact, it's a fact. So let's talk about it at work.
Well, and we just did it, right? There's a ton of articles out there that's supporting why this conversation should continue. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Angela, what was your one sort of big takeaway, or what would be something businesses could be doing more creatively to support working moms?
Never assume that it's a one size fits all. There is no one policy. There is no one benefits offering that you can just go offer and say, yep, we're done. We've offered a more extended parental leave, or we're offering an additional daycare benefit. You have to make it a safe environment for women to speak up about what they might need. And you have to have leaders who can really think flexibly and be supportive and have an open ear. But there is no one policy or benefits offering that is going to fix it. There's just not. Everyone's different.
Nope. Trisha.
So my answer is the same, so I'm going to change it. The latest data that I saw says if we keep going at the rate we're going, gender equity in the C-suite will take us 88 years to get there. And so one of the things that I see is when I talk with companies, they're not tying this dialogue around working moms to that. And that's why we talk about building the pipeline to create your own leaders, like create the loyalty in your own organization. What happens now is, an executive team or a board gets hot on, we need more women, reflected in our C-suite, and then they go and grab a couple from someplace else. Let's build them within, and this is part of the conversation. It is 86% of women are mothers and 70% of working women are mothers. And so we're missing this connection of these two conversations around gender equity, at the C-suite level, and the working mom conversation, that it is a solution to that over time.
You guys are amazing. Before I forget, Mary Kay, will you make sure that you send me the link to the Bloomberg article so I can make sure that I get that in the follow-up, so that I get that out there as well. Thank you all. This was an amazing conversation, and exactly where I was, I don't know, it started, I got to a point where all of a sudden I got to like that halfway point. I was like, man, these stats are sad and depressing. And so I'm really glad we ended with something that felt way more a way for us to be in a place where we can champion this environment and see this opportunity for change, and the opportunity to just support. Change is one part of it, and I think part of it is just being in a place to say, we want to make sure that we're getting everyone the right level of support that they need at work. And moms is obviously, we've got the microscope today on the working mom component, but obviously we could create this whole discussion and talk about, Mary Kay talked about special needs, and we could talk, there's all sorts of degrees of where this needs to fit in. And I just want to thank you all for participating in this conversation in terms of where we're taking this, where we can move the dial here. As we've got just a last few minutes, I want to just do a quick plug for the next Lakeside Chat. So next Lakeside Chat is a WTF Lakeside Chat, but it's not the WTF you know and love. It is when to fractional. And so we are going to talk, Angela, you've already started, there was a nice little softball in your conversation there into this next one. I've got two of the leaders that are running and supporting the information on the upcoming fractional conference that's coming in, or the FRAC, I shouldn't give it its full name. It's FRAC conference in 2024 at the end of October. So Katie Walter and John Arms are going to be sitting alongside me, and what we're going to do for this event is we're going to do a role play. We're going to role play out objection resolution conversations for you to be able to talk about having those what those conversations could look like in your workplace when it talks about when do you make that decision to consider fractional work versus that full-time employee. And so taking some of what we just learned today and bringing that forward into the next conversation as well. And I thank you all for participating. Just as a quick reminder on the backside, obviously, thank you all for being here, being a part of the conversation. As a reminder, I will get everyone in the next 24 hours, fingers crossed, the link to the recording, the deck, and a link to all of the articles that were referenced, as many of the articles, I might not have them all, that were referenced throughout today's conversation. So you've got the data points to be able to dig into where we took them, and also being able to take them a direction that you need to in your own workplace and in your own home. So thank you all for being here, for participating, and everyone have a great day, and stay dry. I think I have to say that for those of us in Minnesota, so stay dry today, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Trisha. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Mary Kay.
Thanks, Erin.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.